burning sky. The sky was burning. Flames lit up the horizon and black smoke covered the stars. Daniel, a lone human explorer, stood on the edge of the alien battlefield, watching destruction fall from the sky. He had come to this world only to gather resources, but now he saw a war that was tearing the planet apart. Strange ships hovered above, their beams firing into the ground. The air shook with the sound of explosions and the earth trembled under his boots. Daniel's heart pounded as he tried to stay hidden behind the broken rocks. He had no reason to be here, no reason to get involved. Yet something deep inside told him that fate had brought him to this place. Through the smoke he saw movement. A group of alien soldiers rushed toward a golden caravan, guarded by only a few fighters. The caravan was elegant, glowing faintly even under the ash, and Daniel realized it carried someone important. The attackers shouted in a harsh alien tongue, blades raised high, fire trailing behind them. Then he heard it. A cry, sharp and desperate, cutting through the chaos. Daniel's eyes snapped to the source. There, trapped under a heavy beam of metal, was a young alien woman, her body glowing with strange markings across her skin. Her voice trembled, but her eyes shone with fire. She was not begging. She was commanding the universe not to leave her behind. Daniel's chest tightened. He had seen many people die in wars, and he had promised himself never to risk his life for strangers, but in that moment, he felt her voice pierce his soul. He couldn't walk away, not this time. He dashed from the rocks, his boots kicking up dust as he ran toward her. The soldiers saw him, their eyes narrowing in confusion. A human on their world was rare, but a human running toward danger was unthinkable. Blades flashed as they moved to cut him down. Daniel threw himself onto the metal beam, his muscles straining as he pushed with all his strength. The heat of the fire burned his arms, sweat dripped into his eyes, and the air filled with choking ash. The woman beneath him clenched her teeth, trying to free herself, but the weight was too much. "Move," Daniel growled, his voice hoarse. With a final desperate push, the beam shifted and she rolled free, gasping for air. The ground shook again as another blast struck nearby. Dust rained down, and the caravan behind them collapsed in flames. The alien woman looked at him, her eyes wide with disbelief. "You, human. Why?" she whispered, her voice fragile yet commanding. Daniel didn't answer. He only grabbed her arm and pulled her to her feet. The soldiers closed in, weapons ready. The young woman tried to push him away, yelling something about duty and bloodline, but Daniel ignored her. He had saved her, and now he would not let her die. The heat, the fire, the roaring battle. It all felt like a nightmare, but his mind was sharp. He had only one goal now: get her out. They stumbled over burning debris, her strange gown catching on broken stone. She ripped it free, revealing more glowing symbols on her arms and shoulders. Daniel noticed but said nothing, only tightening his grip. The soldiers shouted faster now, their boots pounding behind them. Every step felt like the last, every breath like fire in his lungs. Ahead lay a ruined corridor of collapsed buildings, shadows twisting in the firelight. Daniel dragged her inside, pressing against the cracked wall. The soldiers stormed past, searching in the wrong direction, their roars fading into the distance. Only then did Daniel let himself breathe, his chest heaving like a storm. The young woman stared at him, her silver eyes glowing faintly in the dark. Her face was beautiful, sharp, proud, yet tired. She looked at him as if he were both her curse and her savior. "You are a fool," she whispered, her voice shaking with anger and something else. "Do you know who I am?" Daniel shook his head slowly, his hand still on her arm. "I don't care," he said simply. "You needed help." Outside, the sky still burned. The world was collapsing into chaos. But in that ruined corridor, under falling ash and distant fire, something new began. A bond neither of them asked for, but one that would change both their lives forever. The ruins shook as another explosion ripped through the night. Dust fell from the broken ceiling, and Daniel knew they had little time. The alien girl's breathing was fast, her glowing eyes darting between him and the fire outside. She looked proud, like someone who had never begged for help before, yet now she was standing because of him. "We cannot stay here," Daniel whispered, his voice rough. The girl straightened, brushing ash from her skin, her glowing markings still faintly pulsing. She looked at him as if weighing his worth, as if deciding whether he was a danger or a shield. Then she spoke in broken words. "Leave me, human, I am not yours to save." Daniel almost laughed, though there was no humor in it. He wiped soot from his face and stared at her. "Too late for that," he said. "If you stay, you die." The girl opened her mouth to protest, but a scream cut the air, followed by the heavy boots of soldiers. They were closing in. The soldiers moved like shadows, their glowing blades ready, their voices sharp in the alien tongue. Daniel grabbed her hand without thinking, pulling her deeper into the ruins. She resisted for a moment, but then her grip tightened, betraying her fear. The path twisted through fallen stone and broken beams. Firelight flashed through the cracks, shadows chasing them as they ran. Every sound felt louder in the silence of the ruins. Every breath, every heartbeat, every crack of rock under their boots. The girl stumbled once, her gown tearing further, and Daniel pulled her up before she could fall again. She glared at him, angry at her own weakness. "You risk your life for nothing," she hissed, her voice like silver fire. Daniel didn't slow down, his jaw tight. "Not nothing," he answered. "Someone has to choose differently." Behind them, the soldiers' voices grew louder, echoing like thunder in the narrow corridors. They had seen the trail, and soon they would find them. Daniel's mind raced, scanning for an escape. Then he saw it. A gap in the broken wall leading to an underground passage half buried in rubble. He pushed her toward it, his shoulders straining as he cleared the rocks. The space was small, dark, and smelled of damp earth. The girl hesitated, her pride clashing with the reality of death outside. "Go," Daniel barked, and at last she ducked inside, her glowing skin faintly lighting the passage. They crawled through the narrow tunnel, the sound of battle fading above. The earth was cold against their hands, and each stone scraped their skin. Daniel's muscles screamed from the effort, his breath heavy. But when he looked ahead and saw her moving, crawling, surviving, he felt a strange strength. Finally, they emerged into a cavern beneath the ruins. The space was wide, lit faintly by cracks in the stone where moonlight slipped through. Water dripped steadily from above, echoing like a clock in the silence. For the first time since the rescue, they could breathe without fire in their lungs. The girl sat back against the wall, her silver eyes fixed on him. Her breathing was sharp, but her face was calm. "You are reckless," she said softly. "But you saved me." Daniel leaned against the opposite wall, wiping the dirt from his hands. "You don't look very thankful," he said with a faint smile. Her gaze narrowed, her pride returning. "I am not just anyone, human," she whispered. "If they find me, they will not stop at you. They will burn your kind for this." Daniel's heart sank as he studied her glowing symbols, her regal posture even in exhaustion. He realized she wasn't lying. This was no ordinary girl. She was someone who carried power, someone the entire war might hinge upon before he could ask. A sound echoed through the cavern, boots, heavy and fast, entering from another side. The soldiers had found another path, their blades glowing in the shadows. The girl's eyes widened and Daniel's instincts roared alive. He pushed her behind him, grabbing a broken metal rod from the ground. It was hardly a weapon against alien blades, but it was all he had. The soldiers stepped closer, sneering in their alien tongue, their eyes filled with cruel amusement at the sight of a lone human. The girl whispered something behind him, words trembling like a secret. "I told you to leave me. But if you die here, I cannot let it happen." She stood beside him, her markings glowing brighter now, filling the cavern with light. The soldiers hesitated for a breath, surprised by her defiance. And in that moment, Daniel saw the truth. She was not just an alien girl. She was something far greater, something the enemy desperately wanted. But before he could ask her who she truly was, the soldiers lunged. Daniel raised his makeshift weapon, heart hammering. The fight for survival had only begun, and the bond between them, fragile but growing, would be tested in fire and blood. The cavern shook with the clash of steel and the roar of alien voices. Daniel swung the broken metal rod with all his strength, sparks flying as it clashed against glowing blades. The soldiers laughed, mocking the human who dared to fight them. But Daniel's arms did not stop. Every strike was desperate, every breath heavy, yet his eyes stayed locked on the glowing girl behind him. She pressed her hands against the wall, her markings growing brighter with each heartbeat. A soft hum filled the cavern, strange energy pulsing around her. The soldiers noticed and shouted in alarm, realizing she was no ordinary captive. One lunged toward her, but Daniel blocked him with a reckless strike, the rod shattering under the force. The sound echoed like thunder, leaving Daniel unarmed. The soldier smirked and raised his blade for the kill. But then, the air exploded with light. The girl's markings blazed like fire, her eyes burning silver. A wave of energy burst from her chest, throwing the soldiers back into the stone walls. The cavern fell silent, broken only by the drip of water and the heavy breathing of the two survivors. Daniel turned to her, his face lit by the fading glow. What are you?" he asked, his voice raw. She lowered her head, her silver eyes trembling with shame and pride at the same time. "I am no ordinary one," she whispered, her voice heavy with meaning. "I am the daughter of the queen." Her words cut through the silence like a blade. Daniel froze, his chest tightening as the truth sank in. The queen, ruler of an empire feared across the stars, the one whose armies burned worlds. Her daughter stood before him. He stepped back, his hands shaking. "You, the queen's daughter?" he said, struggling to believe it. She nodded, her face calm though her eyes betrayed fear. "If they capture me, they will break my mother's throne. They will use me to end her reign," she whispered. "That is why they hunt me. That is why they will never stop." Daniel's breath caught in his throat. He had thought he was saving a stranger, but now he realized he had placed himself in the center of a war far greater than he ever wanted. His heart told him to run, to escape, before the queen's wrath fell upon him. But when he looked at her, exhausted, proud, glowing with fragile strength, he knew he could not walk away. The girl stepped closer, her silver eyes locking on his. "You saved me, human, but do not think you can leave now," she said softly. "My fate is tied to yours, whether you like it or not." Her words were not a threat, but a vow, one spoken with royal certainty. Daniel felt the weight of them like chains, and yet, strangely, like a bond. The silence was broken again by distant echoes, the sound of more soldiers crawling through the tunnels. Daniel's jaw tightened as he looked at her. "If you're the queen's daughter, then we need to move," he said, "because they will never stop until they have you." She tilted, her head studying him with quiet curiosity. "You are strange, human. Most would run from me, but you run with me." He grabbed her hand again, and together they slipped deeper into the tunnels. The air grew colder, the walls wet with dripping water, the darkness pressing close. Her faint glow lit their path, her presence both comforting and terrifying. Daniel wondered if she even realized how much danger she brought him, but he also knew he couldn't leave her, not now. As they moved, she began to speak, her voice low and steady. "My name is Celira," she said. "I was hidden from the court, hidden from the Empire's enemies, for if they knew I lived, they would seek me as a weapon." Daniel listened, his steps slow but steady. He had never heard of Celira, but her words carried truth, and he saw the weight of loneliness in her eyes. "Why were you with that caravan?" Daniel asked. Celira's lips pressed into a thin line. "They were taking me to a safe place far from war, but someone betrayed us," she said bitterly. "Now, everything is ash." Her voice broke slightly at the last word, but she lifted, her chin again, proud even in pain. Daniel felt something stir in his chest, a mix of pity and respect. She was not just a princess, she was a prisoner of her own bloodline, trapped between power and war. For the first time he saw her not as royalty, not as an alien, but as a girl carrying too much weight for her shoulders. And that made him hold her hand tighter as they moved forward. The tunnel finally opened into a vast underground chamber, a place of broken statues and fallen stone. It looked ancient, forgotten. Yet it gave them shelter for the moment. Celira sat on a cracked pillar, her silver eyes watching Daniel in silence. At last, she spoke, her voice softer than before. You risk your life for me, human. Do you understand what that means? Daniel met her gaze, his face tired but firm. It means I made a choice, he said, and I'll see it through. For a moment, her royal mask broke, and a faint, fragile smile touched her lips. It was the first time he had seen her look like anything other than a queen's daughter. But before the moment could last, the sound of boots echoed again from the far side of the chamber. Celira's glow flickered, her breath catching. Daniel stood tall, gripping another broken piece of stone as a weapon. He knew this was only the beginning. The soldiers would keep coming. The danger would not end. And now, with the queen's daughter at his side, his fate was tied to hers forever. The chamber walls shook with distant thunder, the echo of war rolling through the underground. Daniel and Celira pressed against the cold stone, listening to the sound of marching feet above. The soldiers were spreading, searching, their voices like the hiss of knives in the night. Celira's glow dimmed as she leaned against the cracked pillar, her silver eyes heavy with unspoken worry. Daniel studied her in silence, his mind racing. He had learned the truth. She was the queen's daughter, the heir to an empire feared across the stars. Every step he took beside her carried the weight of 1,000 enemies. He should have walked away, but every glance at her kept him rooted, stronger than fear. Above them, the flames of war painted the sky red. The queen's armies had begun to move. Great ships blotting out the stars. Word had spread across the empire. The princess was missing, stolen by a human. Anger burned in every broadcast, the queen herself declaring vengeance. She thinks you took me, Celira whispered, her voice low, her hand trembling against the stone. She believes you are a thief, a kidnapper of her blood. She will not listen, not yet. Daniel clenched his fists, frustration burning in his chest. Then she's going to kill me before she knows the truth, he muttered. Celira turned her face toward him, her gaze sharp, as a blade. My mother does not forgive, she said. She will burn a world to ash for less if she believes her daughter has been dishonored. Daniel swallowed hard, his heart heavy. He had faced danger before, but never the wrath of a queen whose hand controlled fleets and armies. The soldiers above grew louder, closer. Daniel took Celira's hand again, pulling her deeper into the ruins. They moved through shadows, their steps light but their hearts racing. Celira followed, though her chin was high, her posture still carrying the weight of royalty. At last they emerged into a broken courtyard, the night sky burning with fire. Above, massive ships circled, their beams sweeping the ground like hunters. On the walls, posters flashed with Daniel's face, strange symbols branding him a criminal. Everywhere the message was clear. The queen had spoken. The human had stolen her daughter, and vengeance was coming. Celira's lips tightened as she read the broadcasts. She has condemned you without trial, she whispered. This is her wrath, swift and merciless. Daniel looked at her, his jaw hard. You could tell them the truth, that I saved you, not stole you. Her silver eyes wavered, then dropped. They would not believe me, not while I stand at your side, she said softly. The words cut him, sharp as any blade. He was her rescuer, yet in the eyes of her empire, he was her captor. Still, when her fingers brushed his arm, he felt the truth between them. She trusted him, even if the galaxy did not. The ground trembled again as a ship descended into the courtyard. From its doors spilled soldiers in black armor, their glowing blades slicing the smoke. At their center walked a tall figure cloaked in red, a commander of the queen. He raised his hand, his voice booming. By decree of Her Majesty, the human is to be seized. The princess returned at once. Celira stepped forward before Daniel, could stop her, her silver glow flaring against the night. You will not take him, she cried, her voice echoing with royal power. The soldiers froze, surprised by her defiance. The commander's eyes narrowed. Princess, you are under the spell of this human. We will free you by force. Daniel pulled her back, his teeth gritted. They don't care what you say, Celira, they've already decided. The soldiers began to close in, their blades humming. Celira's grip on his hand tightened, her markings glowing brighter as fear and fury fought in her chest. For a moment, Daniel thought they would die there, surrounded and outnumbered, but then a shadow fell across the courtyard. A ship larger than the rest descended, its hull gleaming with royal sigils. Every soldier dropped to one knee as the ramp lowered. Salira's breath caught, her body trembling. "My mother," she whispered. The queen herself stepped onto the battlefield, her presence commanding silence. Her robes shimmered like fire, her crown blazing with light, her eyes sharp as a storm. She looked at her daughter, alive and glowing, then at the human standing beside her face hardened, carved with fury. "Human," she thundered, her voice shaking the ground. "You dare touch what is mine, you dare steal the blood of my blood, for this I should end you where you stand." Daniel stood firm, though his heart hammered like a drum. He wanted to speak, to explain. But the weight of her gaze froze him. Salira stepped between them, her voice breaking. "Mother, no. He saved me. He carried me from fire and blade. Without him I would be dead." The queen's eyes narrowed, her hand raised, as if to strike. But the hesitation was there, a crack in her wrath. The soldiers waited, the air thick with silence, the fate of one human and one princess hanging on the edge of her judgment. The courtyard burned with silence. The queen's soldiers knelt, their blades humming faintly in the smoky air. Salira stood before her mother, her body trembling but her chin lifted high. Daniel stood at her side, unarmed, a human facing an empire with nothing but courage in his chest. The queen's eyes burned like fire. Her gaze swept over Daniel as, though he was nothing more than dust, her voice thundered. "You touch what belongs to the throne, you dare stand beside her as if you have any right." The weight of her words crushed the air. Yet Daniel did not move. Salira stepped forward, her glowing markings pulsing like living flame. "Mother, stop," she said, her voice sharp with emotion. "You do not see what happened. He saved me." The queen's lips curled in anger, but her hand did not fall. Her daughter's defiance was rare, and it pierced through the storm of wrath. The soldiers shifted uneasily, unsure whether to strike or obey. Salira's glow grew brighter as she turned to Daniel, her silver eyes softening. "You risked everything for me, human," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You carried me when fire fell. You shielded me when death came close." Her hand trembled as she touched his arm. "I cannot let the world call you thief, not when you are my savior." Daniel's heart clenched at her words. He had not asked for this, not for royal blood or empire. All he had wanted was to save someone who cried for help, yet in her eyes he saw something more than gratitude, something fierce, something unshakable. She turned back to her mother, her voice echoing across the courtyard. "I give him my oath," Salira declared. "By the blood of the queen, I claim him as mine." Gasps rippled through the soldiers, their heads snapping up. The queen's eyes widened in shock, her hand trembling for the first time. Daniel froze, the words striking him like a blade. "Salira, what are you saying?" he whispered, but she did not turn to him. Her gaze stayed fixed on her mother. "He is bound to me now, not by chains, but by choice," she said firmly. "If he falls, then so do I." The queen's fury blazed brighter than fire. "You dare speak such words before me," she thundered. "You disgrace the throne. You bind yourself to a mortal who is not of our blood." But Salira's silver eyes held steady. "This human is more than mortal, mother," she whispered. "He has done what no army of ours could. He saved me not because of duty, but because of heart." The silence cracked with tension. The soldiers looked at their queen, then at the glowing princess. Whispers spread like fire through the ranks. A royal oath was no small thing. It could not be broken, not even by the queen herself. Daniel's chest tightened as he tried to speak. "Salira, you don't have to do this for me," he muttered. "I'm just—" Her hand gripped his tightly, silencing him. Her voice was soft now, only for him. "You are not just anything human. You are the one who chose me when death closed in, and for that I will never let go." Her words struck deeper than any blade. Daniel felt the weight of them in his bones. She had made a choice that tied him to her forever, a choice no war could undo. And though fear trembled in his chest, another feeling rose stronger, an oath of his own. He met her eyes, his voice steady. "Then I'll stand with you no matter what comes," he said. "If you claim me, then I claim you too." Salira's silver eyes shone with light, a small, fragile smile breaking across her lips. For the first time since the fire, she looked not like a princess, not like a queen's heir, but like someone who had found hope. The queen's fury broke the moment. Her hand rose again, her voice cutting through the night. "Then so be it," she spat. "If you bind yourself to him, then he is no longer just a thief. He is part of the empire, and he will bear its weight." The soldiers dropped their heads in silence, the queen's judgment echoing like a death sentence. Salira clung to Daniel's hand, her glow pulsing with steady defiance. He felt her strength flow into him, a strange warmth filling his chest. For the first time, he understood. This was no passing rescue, no fleeting chance. This was a bond that had chained them together, not in chains of iron, but in chains of the heart. The night above roared with fire as ships circled. The empire shifted, the queen's wrath simmered. But in the courtyard's smoke and ruin, a human and a princess stood side by side, bound by an oath that neither crown nor army could break. The queen's eyes burned with fire. Her soldiers stood frozen, blades lowered, unsure whether to strike or bow. Salira's voice still echoed in the courtyard, her oath unbroken, her claim on Daniel burning like a brand. Daniel stood silent, his heart pounding, every breath heavy as the weight of an empire fell upon him. The queen raised her hand, her voice sharp as steel. "You dare bind yourself to him, my daughter," she thundered. "Do you know the chains you place upon your own neck?" Salira's silver glow pulsed brighter, her chin lifted in defiance. "These are not chains, mother," she whispered. "This is my choice." The silence that followed was like a blade against the throat. The soldiers shifted uneasily, their eyes flickering between queen and princess. No one had ever dared to claim a human as anything more than a servant. Yet here stood Salira, declaring him hers, and no one dared to speak against it. Daniel swallowed hard, his voice low but steady. "I didn't ask for this," he said, "but I won't run from it either." The queen's eyes narrowed, fire sparking in her gaze. "You speak boldly for a mortal with no crown, no power, no army," she said, her tone dripping with disdain. Salira stepped closer to Daniel, her hand tightening on his. "He has more than any army, mother," she said, her voice sharp. "He has courage, and he gave it freely to me when no one else would." The queen's lips pressed into a thin line, her fury barely contained. Her gaze swept over Daniel again, measuring him as though he were both enemy and test. The soldiers shifted as a new command came from the queen. "Seize him," she said coldly. "If he truly wishes to bear chains, then let him feel the weight of mine." The soldiers hesitated, unsure. Salira's glow flared, her voice ringing like silver fire. "No," she cried. "He is not your prisoner. He is under my protection." The queen's voice dropped lower, softer but deadlier. "And if I decide his place is at my feet, will you stand against me, daughter?" she asked, her eyes locking on Salira's. The tension was unbearable, the soldiers holding their breath. Salira trembled, but her voice did not break. "Yes," she whispered, "even against you." The courtyard froze. A daughter defying her queen, a princess choosing a human over her empire. Daniel felt his chest tighten, his hand gripping hers harder. He wanted to tell her not to do this, not to burn her bridges for him, but the look in her silver eyes silenced him. She had already chosen. "The law." Queen raised her hand again, power crackling around her like lightning. Daniel stepped forward, shielding Salira with his own body. He had no weapon, no plan, but he would not let her face her mother's wrath alone. "If you want me," he said, his voice steady, though his heart thundered. "Take me. But leave her." The queen's hand froze mid-air, her eyes narrowing. The human had spoken with courage, not fear. For a long moment, silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. Then the queen lowered her hand slowly, her face unreadable. You are a fool, she said softly, her words like venom. Yet, there is strength in your foolishness. Her gaze shifted to Selira. You would bind yourself to him even if it means chains around your own throne. Selira nodded without hesitation. I would, she whispered. The queen turned away, her robes flowing like fire in the wind. Then so be it, she said coldly. If he is yours, then he will bear the chains of your choice. She gestured, and the soldiers stepped back, their blades lowering fully, but her voice carried a warning, sharp as any blade. Remember this, daughter. Chains of the heart are heavier than chains of iron, and once they bind, they never break. Daniel exhaled, his chest heavy with the weight of her words. Selira's hand remained locked with his, her glow steady but faint. For a moment they stood in the ashes of war, two souls bound not by command, but by choice. And in that moment Daniel realized something. He was no longer an outsider. The Empire's eyes were on him, the Queen's wrath at his back, Selira's claim in his hand. He had been given chains, but they were chains he chose to carry. As the Queen turned to leave, her army followed, the courtyard slowly emptying into the smoke-filled night. Selira pressed closer to Daniel, her voice soft and trembling. You could have left me, human, but you stayed, she whispered. Now we are bound, and I will never let you go. Her words were both a promise and a warning. Daniel looked into her glowing silver eyes and knew, whatever came next, he would walk it with her. The sky above rumbled as the Queen's ship lifted into the air. The stars vanished under its shadow. The world felt heavier, darker. Yet in Daniel's chest burned a strange fire. He had no throne, no crown, no army, but he had Selira, and in her, he had a purpose greater than himself, the night whispered with uncertainty. The Empire had not accepted him. The Queen had not forgiven him. But Selira had chosen, and Daniel had chosen too. They were no longer strangers, no longer rescuer and rescued. They were bound by something unbreakable. The choice of chains had been made, and their story was only beginning. The night sky glowed red with fire. The Queen's ship rose higher, its shadow swallowing the stars. The courtyard lay in ruins, smoke curling through the broken walls. Daniel and Selira stood together, their hands still locked, the weight of their choice pressing down like stone. The Queen had left, but her warning echoed in the air. Chains of the heart are heavier than chains of iron, she had said. Daniel could feel the truth of those words in the way Selira clung to him, her glow dim but steady. He was no longer just a wanderer, no longer a man who came here for resources. He was part of something larger, something dangerous, something unbreakable. Selira's silver eyes shimmered in the smoke. Then she looked at him with a mix of exhaustion and fierce pride. You see now, she whispered, her voice trembling but sure. I chose you, and nothing in this world will take that away. Daniel swallowed, his chest heavy. You realize what you've done, he said softly. You've tied your fate to a human. Her lips curved into the faintest smile, fragile but defiant. And you tied yours to me, she answered. The ruins around them groaned as fire spread. Daniel knew they could not stay. Not when the Queen's army would watch every step he took. But for the moment they stood still, breathing in silence. It was the calm after the storm, a fragile pause before the galaxy's judgment. Then, from the distance came the sound of drums. Alien horns echoed across the hills, signaling pursuit. The Queen had left, but her wrath had not faded. Hunters would come. Assassins would follow. Spies would track them wherever they went. Selira's hand tightened around his. We must go, she said, her glow flickering with urgency. Daniel nodded, pulling her toward the broken streets. Together, they ran through alleys lit by firelight, past shattered statues and fallen towers. Every corner held shadows. Every echo made Daniel's heart pound, but through it all Selira did not let go, her grip steady as chains of steel. At last, they reached the edge of the ruins, where the land stretched wide and dark. The stars burned, above, vast and endless. Daniel stopped, his chest heaving, his eyes scanning the horizon. Where now? He asked. Selira stepped closer, her silver eyes glowing in the starlight. "Anywhere," she said softly, "as long as it is with you." Her words cut through the chaos. Daniel felt the truth of them deep in his bones. This was no longer about war or throne or empire. This was about a bond stronger than any blade, stronger than any crown. For the first time in years, he felt a purpose, not survival, not wandering, but belonging. The ground shook again as ships roared in the distance. They were being hunted still, but fear no longer ruled him. He turned to Salira, his voice low but firm. "Then we fight, we run, we live, together." Her lips trembled, her eyes glistening like molten silver. "Yes," she whispered. "Together, forever." As dawn broke, the first light of morning painted the sky gold. The fires faded, leaving behind ashes and silence. In that light, Daniel saw her not as a princess, not as an heir, but as a woman who had chosen him above all. And in her gaze he saw not chains, but freedom. For both of them, the bond was not a prison, but a promise. Salira lifted her hand, placing it over his heart. "This is where I belong. Now," she said softly, "with you, no matter the cost." Daniel covered her hand with his own, his voice steady. "And you're mine now," he said. "No crown, no army, no queen can take that away." Far above, the queen watched from her ship, her eyes hard but thoughtful. Her wrath had not faded, but neither had her daughter's defiance. For the first time, she saw the human, not as a thief, but as something more, a chain her daughter had chosen willingly. The queen's voice echoed across the chamber of her ship. "Let it be written," she said coldly. "He is bound to her and she to him, and the empire will remember." Back on the ground, Daniel and Salira walked into the rising sun, their shadows stretching long across the ruins. Every step carried danger. Every breath carried risk, but their hands were still locked, their hearts beating as one. The world might call it foolishness, the empire might call it treason, but for them it was forever. And so the story of a lone human and the daughter of a queen was sealed. Not by war, not by blood, not by crown, but by an oath stronger than iron, by chains chosen freely, by love claimed forever.